Hello there guys, it's Friday, the weekend is ahead of us, which means one thing, it's time for another big old chat about all the news from the games industry, because this is VGC Off the Record. I'm your host, Steven McInerney, and I've been joined alongside me by the tired old hack himself, Mr. Christopher Scullion. How you doing, mate? You good?
Good, yeah, I've been Zelda in it for the last week and a bit, so just Zelda, so tired.
You are literally responsible for my spending of £50 this morning. Thank you so much for that, man.
You're welcome.
Yeah, literally responsible, which we'll get onto in a bit, because of course it is Skyward Sword HD week release day today, actually, as we're recording this. I'm going to be chatting about absolutely loads of stuff today, because of course this is VGC Off the Record, where we go off the record every week to deliver you guys the most considered, most informative takes on all the big stories from the world of video games. And if you're a fan of this, and you like looking at our faces, you can catch us every Friday afternoon over on VGC's YouTube channel. If that's not your thing and you want to listen on the go, of course, VGC Off the Record is available on all the major podcast providers, so you haven't got any excuse to miss us. And we've got quite a few things to talk about today. It was like a weird week of like big stories, then kind of no stories, but then big stories and no stories. But absolutely a massive one. Came out of nowhere yesterday with Valve revealing its Switch-style handheld gaming PC called Steam Deck. Of course, as well, this week, the Skyward Sword HD reviews all dropped, including our very own over on VGC. And Phil Spencer's been busy chatting to another podcast. You might have heard them. They're all right. They're doing all right for themselves, called Kind of Funny. It's a bit like this, but less charming, basically. He was over there on their Gamescast episode chatting away about a whole host of Xbox-related stuff and a little bit about the potential future of the controller for Xbox. We're going to chat about all that today. Firstly, though, are you good, Chris? You've been busy this week. It's mainly been just Skyward Sword for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. It was weird. The first half of the week was quite quiet. In fact, last week was also quick, because obviously we didn't do a podcast last week. It was quite quiet then, and then suddenly the Switch OLED comes out of nowhere, and then it's just like hammering Zelda for quite a long time. So it's been a weird week, and then suddenly it's just got really busy. Obviously, like you say, with the Steam Deck being announced, which has been divisive, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we actually, sorry about last week, by the way, guys. We just couldn't do it for various reasons. But we did miss talking about the Switch OLED, which I think is a decent, actually, little kind of, it's a segue into the first story, actually. So we'll start initially talking a little bit about the OLED before we go into the Steam Deck, because those two worlds, they collide, and we can't really ignore that. The Switch OLED, I mean, you're obviously, you're the Nintendo guy in many people's eyes. Which I don't know where that puts you in reaction to this, in terms of like, oh, you're an honest man, so it doesn't really matter too much. But how did you feel too much about the Switch OLED when it was announced? Because I mean, people haven't caught up yet. Of course, you probably have if you listened to this podcast. It's essentially the same old thing with a brighter, prettier screen. OLED, of course, much more lush with the colors. Battery life the same. The internals the same. It's kind of the same, just a nice big screen, really. I mean, is that okay for you? Is that enough?
It's fine. I think a lot of kind of rumor and speculation, which are always words we generally hate at VGC. I'd kind of assumed that
it's off the record. We're good.
Oh yeah, of course. I'd assumed that we were going to end up with something that would kind of be capable of 4K output at the very least, some sort of upscaling. And obviously that hasn't happened. But I wouldn't necessarily say that means that's not still on the cards. It just seems like this is the 3DS XL before we get the new 3DS, I think. So I think there is still a kind of a Switch Pro, if you want to call it that, in the works. It's just this isn't it yet. And so it seems fine. I'm still not certain yet whether I'm going to upgrade yet, because I think it really just boils down to how much. I was going to ask you that, yeah. I think it just boils down to how much you play your Switch on the go. Because I generally play my Switch at home on the TV, so it doesn't really offer much for me, because I'm not going to get the benefit of the screen most of the time. I'm going to work from home now. I don't have a commute. This is my life.
Who commutes anymore? That's the thing. Exactly. I'm quite excited, because I'm quite excited to use the Switch as a handheld, because me and my partner we're off down to the Cotswolds as soon as we finish this video, basically for the weekend. I'm like, and she's driving, so I'm like, yes. So I've just got the Switch out just to play in Zelda, but that's so rare these days, because no one goes anywhere, because commuting has changed basically as well. And I'm looking forward to that quite a lot. It quite amused me yesterday as well, seeing this like everyone fighting for a pre-order for the OLED. I think it was a lot of American Twitter basically just being like, "Oh, get in for the pre-order." And I got home last night after being out for a couple of drinks about 11, just looked online, and it was available at very August everywhere. Basically, I was like, "Oh." I was expecting it to be like disappeared, but it kind of. I'm not sure it's available this morning still, but it's still what I can see. It seems to be available. I don't think it's flew off the shelves. Of course, it would have done really well, but I think you can get one if you want one still. Is my general guess of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for America because I think they're a very different beast when it comes to the Switch. I think some areas of America still struggle to keep the Switch in stock even today, like 4 years later, which is crazy. But yeah, I think by and large, if you absolutely desperately want one, you'll be able to find a way. I don't think we're not looking at another PS5 around here, and I think that's because it's not much of a. I think if it had been a 4K system, you'd get people kicking doors down to try.
We both would have got it, wouldn't we? Let's be honest.
Oh, but I wouldn't
ordered it straight away.
Thought about it, or pre-ordered instantly. Whereas now I'm having to sit and think about it, but I'm happy that I've got the luxury to sit and think about it and without going, "Oh, bite now," otherwise it's gone. So I'll wait until nearer the time and see how it's looking.
It's interesting because I'm torn between that whole world of like, is the Switch Pro real, man? Is that going to come one day, or is like put it this way, in 12 months after buying and spending another 300 quid or whatever, I'm thinking, oh, I should have just waited, and then something else. You just never know, really, do you? Because we'll see. But either way, the Switch Pro was announced yesterday, kind of, not directly, via Valve. That's the meme online. People have been talking about it. If you've been anywhere near the internet, you'll know there was a big bit of news basically in the games industry because it's for a while now. It's felt like Nintendo kind of dominated the handheld market, but you can't ignore Valve. The Steam Deck, and this is the details. So you have to sit comfortably because I'm going to read the whole article over in VideoGamesChronicle.com because there's a lot to take in from this story because it's all important basically. I'll put an image as well. Actually on screen as well of the Valve Steam Deck because I don't usually do that with these videos, but I think it's kind of important to see what it looks like. And Andy's not here, so we've got a bit of space to play on the screen as well.
It's just a Wii U gamepad, isn't it?
It's a Wii U gamepad, yeah. Before I read the story, the initial impressions aesthetically, it's not that impressive aesthetically. It really isn't. I mean, it looks exactly what I would have thought a PC handheld would have looked like. They don't. They don't do design particularly well, is what I would say there, and that's I don't think it does. But either way, I mean, apparently it's functional, it works. But I'll read the article. Valve has announced Steam Deck, its Switch-style handheld gaming PC. The device, which was first reported on earlier this year, is described as a powerful, all-in-one portable PC capable of running the latest AAA games. Like a Nintendo Switch, it can even be plugged into a television via cables or an official dock, which will be sold separately. Steam Deck is also an open PC, Valve said, with the ability to install any software or connect with any hardware. The handheld will feature a powerful custom APU developed with AMD, a 7-inch touchscreen, full-size controls with gyro and trackpads, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, micro SD, expansion slot, and a USB-C port. It will begin shipping in December with prices starting at $399 for 64 gigabyte storage. Increased storage options will be available for $529 with 256 gigabyte NVMe SSD and $649 512 gigabyte storage NVMe SSD. Reservations start today. Require a $5/(£4) down payment and previous purchase history on Steam, so Valve can avoid potential unauthorized resellers. The handheld gaming PC runs Steam OS 3.0, and Valve's developers' existing game builds will likely work right out of the box. Features such as Steam Chat, notifications, cloud saves, the store, community, and remote play from a PC will all be included, Valve says. And battery life, which is a big one, is said to be in the range from 2 to 8 hours, which is quite a big variance there, depending on the activity. Gabe Newell, the Valve founder, said, we think Steam Deck gives people another way to play the games they love on a high-performance device at a great price. As a gamer, this is a product I've always wanted. And as a game developer, it's the mobile device I've always wanted for our partners. He said, speaking to IGN, he felt Valve needed to be very aggressive in terms of pricing, which he viewed as one of the critical factors in the mobile space. He said as well, I want to pick this up and say, oh, it all works, it's all fast, it's all, and then price point was secondary and painful. But that was a pretty clear, that was pretty clearly a critical aspect to it. But the first thing was the performance and the experience. That was the biggest and most fundamental constraint that was driving this. So basically, we've got a PC here in a handheld. What was your initial reaction to this whole thing? I know you've tweeted a little bit about the storage issues, which we'll get onto.
Yeah.
I must admit, I'm not sure if you are, but I've never really been a PC gamer, which I feel like I need to add that there. So some of these specs, I mean, I read them and went, like, I then Googled what they meant, and I looked for more educated souls to tell me, is that good or is that not good? So I had to do a little bit of research to evaluate it. Are you a PC gamer, and what was your initial reaction to the Steam Deck as well?
Sometimes. I mean, I dabble. I've got my kind of overly large Steam library, like a lot of people have, where you buy a million games and never play them. I play PC games every now and then. I'm not an obsessive. I'm not like a keyboard mouse like type guy. I always plug a joypad and play, because I still can't lose that console urge. So when I do play PC games, I do my very best to try and make it as much like a console as possible. Yeah, because I'm a scumbag. But
you said it.
But yeah, so when it was first announced, I was actually off yesterday. I had a day in lieu after manning the site when someone was suffering a hangover after being at the Euro final. So I was,
what do that could be?
No. So I was off yesterday, so wasn't kind of covering the story. And so when I first noticed about it, it was on Twitter. I saw that the headline saying Valve announces Steam kind of deck prices start at $399, and I was like, oh, that's actually not bad. That's in competition with the Switch almost. So initially, I actually said to Louise, my wife, like before I even turned on like the video on YouTube about kind of promoting it and stuff, I said to Louise, this could be the thing I treat myself to at Christmas. This could be my big kind of Christmas break thing. And then started watching like and checking out all the stuff, and then it was I quickly realized, I was like, no, this isn't for me, because prices start at $399 means nothing when you see the storage you get for that model. And if you're going to be a portable PC, 64 gigabytes is zero. Like that's a non-starter in terms of storage, unless you're buying it for the very lowest the indie games that require the most minimum specifications, because those are the ones that are likely to be quite small in file size. And then if you're buying it for those, then why are you spending that much money on a PC when there are other ways, such as the Switch, to play indie games on the move? It's just, if the big selling point is that this is a PC capable of playing AAA games, then 64 gigabytes shouldn't even come into the equation, because some like Red Dead 2 is 150 gigs. You're nowhere near it at that. And even the one up, the next one up, the 256 gig one, seems fairly small in terms of capacity as well.
It does have. Just to interrupt quickly, because I think it's a relatively important side point, which I can't say once again I'm an expert, but it does have, you can of course add external storage, with a micro SD expansion slot. I can't speak with confidence about the speed factor here, and I saw you talking about your Twitter the idea about games loading slowly. And once again, I presume you're talking to an idiot. Well, not presume, you just are. In general, like, how does that affect performance of the game? Do you mean loading as in literally booting up, or do you mean performance issues? If you know what I mean by that?
I mean, it depends on the game, really. I mean, also you could spend the micro SD card speed thing is like a massively complicated subject itself, because no two micro SD cards are the same. But because you get all these wee kind of gradings on each one that specify the speed, and people who shoot 4K video on the micro SD cards need specific types because they read and write quicker. But by and large, like the average one you would go onto Amazon and pay a reasonably cheap price for isn't very fast in the grand scheme of things. It's fine for taking photos and storing them on a camera or stuff like that, or storing music or something. But if you're talking games, especially PC quality AAA games, which they're claiming to be able to run, you need pretty fast storage. Like the very fast micro SD cards are kind of in line with disk-based hard drives on a PC. And those are like you're talking like the higher end of the SD card market. It's like, so you're not talking like a 256 gig micro SD card for like 40 quid, 50 quid, which you can get on Amazon. Those will still be pretty slow. You're talking 100 quid or something for like a really fast one that, and even then it's still nowhere near the speed of this 512 gig Steam Deck that's coming out has like special SSD memory storage put in it, which will be really fast. It'll be in line with what you would expect from a modern system. Running high quality games off an SD card, the problem is loading in all the assets and then accessing them. Although obviously a lot of that will be saved in the RAM, but it's gaining. It's the loading screens basically. You're going to end up with long loading screens as it's loading all these assets from the SD card into memory, and the slower the storage medium, the longer that's going to take. By and large, there's obviously other things to take into account, but that's one of the main ones.
I can't imagine, Valve are stupid. I'm sure they've thought about all this as well. Like, I'm not. You're not saying that for what it's worth, but I'm sure they'll know. People would have mentioned this straight away because it jumps out at you. Yeah. I forgot, by the way, some fundamental features of this. It's going to be in 720p, I think, which it's going to be like a 7-inch screen or something like that, which is similar to the Switch OLED size. I think it's about the same, isn't it? Or something like that. I think is it Switch OLED 7.5 or is it 7? It's very similar size either way. And I think it's going to be 60 hertz, which is, rough. Am I right in saying that's around 60 FPS then, basically, for games, if it needs to be? So I think 720 is roughly fine for what it's worth, by the way. If you've got a 7-inch screen, I'm not really, people will go, 4K, it's like 4K on a screen that big, there's no point, there's literally no point. So I understand the screen size, but back to the storage thing, I don't know what SD card I'm using my Switch. I don't know what it is. I'm almost certain I just ordered something. Ordered something online.
There's the thing is that Switch games are built for. Switch games by and large have fairly low quality textures and low quality assets. Yeah. So because they're being built for the Switch, the problem here is that we're taking something like developers may have to kind of figure out a way to make games more compatible with the Steam Deck if this is going to be the case going forward, because just as an example, NBA 2K21 on the Switch is like 40 gigs, which in itself is a massive game. That's a pretty big game. So that's 40 gigs because of all the assets and stuff that are on it. But on PC, it's like 110 gigs, something like that, because all the assets there are far higher quality and they're supporting up to 4K resolutions and stuff like this. So if you're loading from a micro SD card on Switch, it's generally okay. You're going to get long loading times in some games, which you often do on the Switch, but they're pulling in assets that are fairly low. The file sizes are fairly small because they're designed for lower quality visuals. But if you're pulling in stuff from a 110 gigabyte game, you're facing potentially long loading screens, and that's my concern. I mean, I've yet to look at the thing, so they may have done some sort of wizardry that makes me look like a complete knob 3 months from now, or however long, 5 months from now when it comes out.
I think Valve will win for what it's worth. They'll find a way.
And I totally understand there may be an argument, but it's like, well, you put the AAA games on the main storage and you put indie games on the SD card, because for indie games, totally fine. SD card would be totally fine for loading something like that. But if the selling point is that this does AAA, because they were pushing AAA quality games.
They showed like Control looking really good on it as well. What else did they show on it? I saw Control at very least. They showed Portal, which I suppose is a number of years old, so that's fine. That's doable anyway. But they were talking about some. Totally forgot, but they showed some fairly new stuff. I watched. Did you watch the? There's a big kind of like blowout over on IGN, isn't there? I think I watched that video along, which is worth a watch, of course, after you finish watching this, obviously. But it's worth a watch. But I mean, look, my issue. I spent a lot of the, coincidentally, spent a lot of last week. I'm not sure if it was because of the Switch Pro or whatever, or the Legend Switch Pro, Switch OLED. I spent a lot of this week looking at a lot of those kind of retro gaming handheld ones. I was going down that rabbit hole quite a bit, and it got me kind of relatively in the headspace for something like this unintentionally. And I must admit, when I did look at it and be like, my initial reaction was this: like, oh, that'd be pretty cool playing these games on the go, because the novelty. I mean, even this morning when I booted up Skyward Sword HD on the Switch, I was like, oh god, this is class. It's it's a big action Zelda game on handheld, and I'd forgotten what that novelty felt of, just because I remember that the first year or two of the Switch being really intense, that feeling of handheld. And for the last year or so, it kind of winded down a little bit. Maybe it's because there's not been as many big first party Nintendo games, but I felt it a little bit this morning. And I must admit, my initial reaction to this, from a purely consumer, not tech led response was, well, oh, that looks really cool. I want to be these games on the go and stuff. But I guess I understand entirely the storage concerns. I mean, I wonder if people will. I mean, people will go in for. I mean, it's worth pointing out, by the way, the quality of the hard drives is different depending on the starting point, isn't it? So I don't know what is eMMC. What can you explain the difference between eMMC and SSD?
I mean, I'm no massive expert on these things, but as I understand it, eMMC is similar in speed to like an SD card type thing.
Okay.
As I understand it, I mean, there'll no doubt be people in the comments calling me every name under the sun, but certainly the general,
bring it on.
The general gist is that as you progress through the models and get the higher storage space, the storage is getting faster as well.
So I think realistically, I think it feels like you have to go for the mid-tier onwards, doesn't it, really, if you want that, that PC feel in a handheld. Otherwise, you're getting something that isn't a PC feel. Maybe I'm wrong there, but basically, at the $529 one, which is, it's aggressive for what it is in terms of the specs, but it's still an expensive handheld, That's the 256 gigabyte with the NVMe SSD, which, of course, SSD, it's good. SSD is great. In terms of the actual specs, I saw people claiming, and I'm not sure if you can back this up, saying it's probably around the quality of a PS4 or an Xbox One in terms of what it's capable, which is, I mean, that sounds impressive to me. I mean, once again, the practicalities of it, how it works in motion, we don't know yet. We'll have to wait, of course, when it comes out. But I mean, that's obviously a step forward from the Switch, clearly. Is this an actual rival for the Switch, or is it a different custom base entirely?
Yeah, I don't think it's a rival. I'm sure it'll do okay. I'm sure it'll do fine. But you're not going to see this on the shelves of Asda or Walmart, if you will, competing with the Switch and competing with Xbox and competing with PlayStation. It's very much a handheld aimed at existing PC gamers, I think. I don't think you're going to get people who don't play PC games suddenly going, oh, maybe I'll start playing PC games now because of this thing. I think this is for PC gamers who want to play on the move rather than people who were previously averse to PC games and wanted an easier in, because I don't necessarily think this is it. Especially when you consider it's clearly built with a handheld in mind, and obviously you've got the dock and all this kind of stuff. But if their selling point is that it can play AAA games at 720p at reasonable frame rates, then when you plug your dock into your PC, you've got to imagine, unless you're willing to stay at 720p, if you're going to boost that up to 1080 or anything like that, suddenly you're going to start seeing issues, I would imagine, because then it's going to potentially struggle, unless there's extra power in the dock, which is yet to be confirmed, like there is with the Switch. If they're saying that other USB-C docks can work with it, which suggests to me that the dock is literally just a video out for it, which powers it, in which case you're taking something that as a handheld sounds great because it can handle 720p, which is all the handheld needs, at say 60 frames a second. But when you then put that on your TV, suddenly it looks worse than other consoles, because 720p is just going to look quite bloody on a 4K telly, for example. So again, I think one of the reasons it isn't for me is, like we were saying with the Switch OLED as well, is I don't play many games handheld these days. Unless it's a specific handheld I'm playing, like a Game Boy or a DS or something. If I have an option to play something on the TV, I'll take it. I'd rather play on the TV. So I think that's why I'm kind of down on this, because it doesn't seem like anything other than handheld play is what it's kind of tuned for, and I think when if you were to play it on a TV, you're going to get a lesser experience, I think. I
mean, for some people, that's exactly why they want it, So it's very much cost to cost, really, isn't it? I mean, obviously a lot of the lives have changed since the pandemic, and there's a lot less commuting. But I mean, personally, you'd given me this option 2 years ago. Depending on how it reviews and how it feels in the hands, and say it reviews really well, and it's very capable of playing Red Dead 2 on the go, and I was like, this is great fun. I'd have been a lot more tempted. I mean, because my circumstances have changed now. I'm here a lot, I'm never out about because the world has changed and people do Zoom meetings now, and we're all we're all just bits on a screen as opposed to actually meeting people in person. Hopefully that will change in the future going forward. But I think it's very much, I mean, this is not the official VGC verdict, don't worry. But for me personally, and it sounds like for Chris, it's very much wait and see, really. I mean, I think that's probably as well. I mean, this is going to make some people very happy. And for those people, I'm really excited for, like, because it will, some people will absolutely love this. And to be honest, the way I see it from a purely consumer-led basis, the more variety in the handheld market, the better, of course. I mean, and maybe for those Nintendo fanboys out there, like myself, if I'm being honest, and maybe Chris as well, maybe this maybe this is the challenger in a different kind of way that Nintendo are going to Nintendo regardless. But either way, the point is, the more handhelds in this market, if this becomes a moderate success, who knows, man? Maybe the Vita comes back or whatever. Who knows? Maybe, maybe, who knows? Basically, it's good. Maybe the PSP comes back or something like that. Either way, it's good having people to challenge Nintendo in the space, even if the space is going to be very different. But it's all good, man. Like the more options, the better. Obviously, it's early days for this. It's still less than 24 hours, really, since this was announced. So the critical world is still trying to digest it. And we obviously, a lot of us haven't really had a handheld. Well, pretty much everyone hasn't really had a chance to hold it in the hand yet. It's interesting to see how it goes. I mean, I'm excited just to see how it's received, basically. I don't know if I can afford it or if it's going to be for me either, because I'm probably with you in that in terms of my lifestyle choices have changed, whereas 3 years ago I was really excited for a handheld, 4 years ago even now. But we'll see. It's Valve announcing the Steam Deck. It's Valve in the handheld industry. That is only a good thing for games. I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed. Go on.
Yeah, like you say, it's a wait and see for me just now as well. I think it's like you say, competition is always a good thing, and nobody wants to see it fail. Like the only people who want to see it fail are like the fanboys, and I'm not really interested in engaging in that. It may not necessarily be for me, but I hope it does find an audience of people who like it. Like I would like to see
none of
Stadia.
us benefit.
No, I would like to see
none
Stadia
of us benefit for its failing.
For people who are into Stadia. It's just that I have no interest in it whatsoever. But if it does well, then fair play to them. But for me, it's very much a wait and see. The fact that and the IGN stuff that was being shown off was showing that the hardware isn't final and it's only 5 months away, makes me a tad curious to see what's going on there. And the fact that Valve has had failures in the past with like the Steam controller, for example, suggests that this isn't a guaranteed smash hit. We need to wait and see if this does actually take off, or if it's just going to be something that a niche number of people kind of snap up and then Valve gives up on it in a couple of years' time. All this stuff remains to be seen. I hope it does well, because like we both agree, the more of these things that are out in the wild and succeeding, the more people end up playing games and the more this industry gets pushed forward. But it's very much a watch this space. I think it'd be although there are obvious things that I can be concerned about just now, such as the storage space, which is a known quantity. There are so many other elements of it that we need to get in our hands first before we can definitively say whether this is a good thing or not.
Who knows what Valve have got the hand? I'm sure they considered it. I'm sure there's ways around it. They've probably done some wizardry to make it so that the game that you prioritize is somehow on the SSD and not on the. I don't know. They would have done something, but fingers crossed. Was once again, just to reiterate, like, fanboyism doesn't help. It doesn't help the industry. Like, support your consoles and like what you play, but you want a competitive game because we all benefit then, because Sony pushed Nintendo and Nintendo pushed Xbox, and then Xbox get pushed by Valve. It's all good. It all feeds into the same ecosystem, so we all want that. Moving on to the second story. We've touched on it a few times today already, but let's kind of dive into it a little bit more. Dive being the upper word. Diving off.
Nice.
Yeah, that was unintentional. I didn't even explain it, but it'll kind of work. Skyward Sword HD has landed today. I've downloaded it because of this guy next to me. I got the mirror a bit wrong then. It's this way. He dropped his review over on VGC and he went in big. Chris Scullion went in big. The Nintendo shill himself.
Hope that takes off.
The Nintendo. They're no longer the title tag. You're the Nintendo shill. He's not, for what it's worth. Obviously, he's just a man who likes his games. He gave it a 5 out of 5 over on VGC, saying, and I'll read the summation. Of course, you go and check out the full review. There's a video review as well, which there'll be a link at the end of this video. You can just click through and find it. And this was Chris's summary. Hang on, let me scroll down to the bottom of the review. My laptop's decided to go very slow for some reason today. I think it's the heat.
Fair,
It's really hot today.
Most people just scroll down to the bottom anyway and look at the numbers. So
Yeah. This Chris's summation was Skyward Sword HD is a superb remaster of the decade-old Wii game that not only gives it a much-needed visual upgrade, but also throws in so many quality-of-life improvements, not least of all the free camera, that it immediately makes the original version obsolete. In terms of the positives, he said the new free camera instantly removes 90% of the original game's frustrating moments. Fantastically sharp visuals and a 3D Zelda at 60 FPS is stunning. Button controls are a joy to use and arguably better than motion controls. Countless other tweaks are like less fee, skippable dialogue, and autosave. As a negative, you put that the Skyloft hub is still a bit lacking in meaningful things to do. Elsewhere, the critical reception's been pretty positive from what I can see. I think you went near the top, but I mean, I noticed there's a lot of kind of like 8 out of 10s or 4 out of 5s going around. I mean, I remember Game Informer giving it 8. I think The Guardian gave it a 4 out of 5 as well. Overall, people have said it does improve on possibly an underappreciated Zelda game. Some people still aren't a fan of Skyward Sword. It's always been really divisive amongst Zelda fans for many reasons. And I'm kind of curious about this. I mean, I've already bought it, so I've obviously made my mind up one way or another that I was going to get it. You've been playing it. You completed it now, I presume, because obviously you did it for the review. Do you want to explain yourself with a 5 out of 5 if anyone's been critical of why you jumped in there and gave it a perfect score, Chris?
I got a fair amount of DM abuse from people who I think there are people who.
What is wrong with people?
I think there are people who just like. There are people who just like to go on Metacritic and hunt down the people who have given the extreme highs or extreme lows in every review and shout abuse at them for trying to get clicks by deliberately being able to tell what every other site is going to give a game and then deliberately position myself at the top or the bottom to get the most traffic, which is just like, I mean, why would I do it? Why would I willfully take on abuse like that? The reality is, the reason we're at the top of Metacritic is because we use a 5-star scoring system. And so we were always going to be given it either 80% or 100%. And that's just the way Metacritic works. Like if we'd had and that's not criticizing, I prefer our 5-star scoring system because I think scores get in the way of reviews too much. And by giving it a simple 5-star system, that's just like either it's crap, it's average, it's okay, it's decent, it's brilliant, or it's a must-have, and that's all you need. That's the only kind of thing. 5 stars doesn't mean it's perfect.
It bugs. I do a lot of football videos, and it's a quick aside. Is that the amount of times everyone's like, "Do a player rating thing," and I can talk for a minute or two about football play, and everyone goes, "You're absolutely spot on." Then I give my score, and they go, "I disagree wildly." It's like it's crazy how the number means so many different things to so many different people. It's the same in any industry, be it video, be it games, music, film, whatever. And it's weird, isn't it? Because they probably wouldn't disagree with anything you said, but they disagree just with your score, which is crazy.
Yeah. And then the fact that all these, and not to criticize Metacritic, because obviously it plays an important part in kind of gathering together all these reviews and giving people kind of at a glance view, but it does kind of tweak the way these scores are interpreted, because depending on the site I would have written this for, like the score would have been different because of the scoring system. Like we've got a 5-star rating, so it's 5 stars. If it had been on a site that has a out of 10 rating, it would have been a 9. It weighs more towards 5 than 4. I mean, because 4 stars would have technically been 80. So that's the only reason that we're top of Metacritic, is because we gave it 5 stars instead of 4, and so we're near the top half instead of the bottom half, which is where we would have been if we'd given it 4. So that's fine. It is what it is. In terms of the actual game itself, which I think is what you were asking,
it's 81 by the way on Metacritic. It's just worth adding there. So 81, which is interesting by the way. The original is at a 93, which is it's funny how the world works. It's funny, isn't it? Because you have to. Is it difficult, by the way? Is this a question for you? Is it difficult reviewing an older game and then trying to review it for what it is now, if that makes sense? Is it like, do you have to try and review it as a 2021 game, or are you trying to review it based on, do you know what I'm getting with that? Like, because like, is it hard, because I'm reviewing it as Skyward Sword and what they've done to it, or are you reviewing it as a game in 2021?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. You need to kind of juggle it, because you're trying to cater to the people who played it before and want to know what's changed, but also at the same time realizing that in the decade that's passed, there may be a whole load of new gamers who have never played it before and don't even know what it is in the first place. So you're kind of trying to, they are the most difficult games to review as remasters and stuff, because you're trying to decide who to cater more towards. Like in the case of this one, because there's so many improvements, leaned heavier towards what's been fixed rather than here is what the game is. So the review's got like a kind of brief introduction saying this is what it is, and kind of peppered throughout it is saying, oh, these are the best bits of why we liked it in the first place. But for the most part, it focuses on what's changed, because I think there are so many like additions that by the time you get through all those, the review's already like nearly 2,000 words long, and like nobody's going to keep reading all that. But the thing I didn't have time to say in the review, and it might have kind of changed some people's impressions of me as a person writing the review, was that I wasn't massively fussed about Skyward Sword in the first place. Like, there were bits in it that I loved, which I mentioned in the review. So the bit where one of the deserts, the desert areas get these kind of time stones, and when you hit them, everything around it goes to the past, and just
is that
grass appears, and it gets really cool. Yeah, and like that's incredible. That's one of my favorite bits in any Zelda game. But by and large,
by the way, back in originally,
no, I didn't.
Okay, no,
that would have been.
Were you at official Nintendo magazine then?
I think I was teetering between official Nintendo magazine and Nintendo Game at the time. So I think Matthew Castle reviewed it for official Nintendo magazine, and he gave it a good score. But so did everyone at the time. This is weird kind of Zelda phenomenon where a new Zelda game comes out and gets great reviews across the board, and everyone loves it. And then 5 years later, everyone says, actually, that was a bit shit, wasn't it?
Because I've got a bugbear with that, is I think people think about games too much. And I said that for someone sat on a podcast doing it now. But what I mean by that is, like, instinctively people play a game and they really enjoy it, and then they go, but did I enjoy it? Like, no, you did enjoy it at the time, and anything can be pulled to pieces with like loads of critical reaction, which once again, and we're complicit right now, clearly. But I do think their initial reaction is like, if they enjoyed it that much to give it that score, and even if it's just a hype, they still enjoyed it, you know, like, and obviously, you know, retroactive looks are important at things, but at the same time, if your initial reaction to that was, this was great fun, but then you go, yeah, but was I really bothered by this looking back? Like, I think sometimes you can overthink things, and I do think that, like, the discourses around Zelda games is a great example. And I think actually, when the first time you start most Zelda games, you are overwhelmed by the beautiful worlds, and you are overwhelmed by the music, and you are overwhelmed by the visual styles, because they're very good. But it's so easy to sit there and try and pull them to pieces. But maybe actually that initial reaction of like, it's just exactly what it is. It's a great cracking adventure. And I do think Skyward Sword was one that was very much beaten and abused by time, even by myself for what it's worth, you know. But I still remember playing it, kind of thinking, oh, I'm not going to like this bit. But like almost like begrudgingly going, it was really good, actually. It was really good fun, you know, because it undeniably was good fun. I mean, I understand why people weren't a fan of the motion controls, but at the time, the world was a lot more gimmicky. But what I will say, like, it was, wasn't it? You know, things like motion controls were still very much the thing that everyone tried, and you know, we're all used to it from the Wii. But I think people have been a little bit harsh on Skyward Sword. And I know Andy's not a fan as well. Fair enough, you know. But like, it's still, you know, some of those dungeons are phenomenal. They're just phenomenal. It's undeniably. I'm just ranting there because I get annoyed about.
No, you're right.
It's just. But anyway, go on. You were saying about.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think you're right because like exactly the same thing happened with Twilight Princess as is happening just now with Skyward Sword. Is that it came out and at the time everyone was going, "This is brilliant. This is another great Zelda game. Well done, Nintendo. Pats in the backs all around. Drinks are on us." And then 5 years later, everyone's saying, yeah, Twilight Princess was shit, wasn't it? What were they thinking? Oh, this and this and this, and turned into a wolf. What a dick! And now they've been doing the same with Skyward Sword, saying, "Oh, Skyward Sword was a bit shit. All the motion controls and blah blah blah." And then their HD version comes out, and everyone then says again, "Actually, yeah, it is quite good." And it's this kind of Zelda games have this kind of weird appreciation curve where it goes up and down.
I think, and it's like we care too much, then we act like we don't care, but then we get neutral because we've not thought about it for a while. Then we play again. Oh, it's pretty good actually, and we remember we go back to the initial state of like the first impression again. If that makes sense, it's almost like you get that initial excitement again when you play it, expect nothing, and the reason people go, "Oh, it's pretty good actually," is because they've removed all the emotion from it and they just play it again and go, "Oh, this is a good game." That the initial impression comes back again, and like I think that's quite telling that when we replay a game again after all the critical consensus and we enjoy it again, that maybe the initial reaction was probably the right one. It's just we've got too down our rabbit hole of over analysis.
It's also important to remember that over time, the motion control era has just been met with more resentment over the years. A lot of people, not from me. I mean, I've always seen the benefits of it when it's been done properly. I mean, as someone who worked at the official Nintendo magazine I started 6 months before the Wii came out, and left like as the Wii U was just coming out. So I lived through the entire course of I worked on O&M the entire course of the Wii's life. And on a daily basis, you go online and see people just going waggle, waggle, waggle to every new game that comes out. And it's like, well, yeah, but you've got to actually look at it and see. It would be like the equivalent of today. Everyone's just saying ray tracing every time a new game comes out. And it's like, yeah, but how does it do it? Like, does it do it well? Does it? Because some games with motion control, like Silent Hill, Shattered Memories, and Zack and Wiki, and kind of a million underappreciated Wii games, like, made great use of motion controls. And I think that's just that over time, a lot of people kind of resent Skyward Sword because it was one of the big motion control games,
isn't it? Yeah.
And a lot of people also remember that horrible E3 demo where Miyamoto tried to play it on stage, and because there was interference or something, it just looked awful.
Yeah.
And nothing was going the way he was moving it, so that looked horrible too. So but yeah, I think I would hope that a lot of people who play it nowadays, especially with the new button control, I played the whole thing in button controls. I played a bit with the two Joy-Cons just to make sure the motion worked how I remembered it, and it does. It's fine. There's no real issues there. But with button controls, totally transformed it for me, to be honest. That plus the rotating camera, that it blows my mind to think, because you forget about these things and then you think, Skyward Sword was crap because the sword wouldn't shut up and the tutorials were crap at the start and this and that and everything. And then you go back, and I went back to play it before I got a hold of this one just for kind of research, just to remind myself of what it was like. And I was like, going online to find out the controls for how to rotate the camera, and then realizing that you couldn't. I was going, well, this is why it was shit, because it doesn't feel like a modern game. It's like so the fact that they added like a
thing
camera
back then, by the way, like
that was
cameras could rotate back then, so it's not like that was like just they just did, you know?
Yeah, because like obviously Twilight Princess had a rotating camera, and Wind Waker did Wind Waker have a rotating camera?
I can't remember that.
I'm pretty sure Wind Waker had a rotating camera.
I feel like I remember looking around and seeing Link's little face, because he had his dispassionate face.
The GameCube had 2 sticks. Yeah. So it did do like a step backwards, but people didn't seem to bother at that point because it got really high reviews and stuff. But yeah, it's just so the camera transforms it and turns it into like a totally new game for me. And the button controls using the right stick to slash is fantastic. So yeah, I hope people kind of look at it with a fresh kind of pair of eyes again and judge it by modern standards, because it still holds up, I think.
I played 20 minutes of it. It's literally on 20 minutes before we started this video today, and I saw some people in some reviews, and I'm not saying they're wrong for what it's worth, because we all have different levels of, we all learn things at a different pace, and I'm 100% not saying it's wrong. It's very likely that I picked it up quicker than my missus will when she plays it. Like, saying I was right, but I saw people saying in reviews that they found holding L as the button thing to then rotate the camera as quite hard to remember. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not sure it's because you told me about it in advance, and I was ready for it, but I picked up I felt like I picked up in a minute, like genuinely it became very obvious straight away. And I mean, obviously some people will struggle that. I mean, I didn't like the fact you can't do it when you're really sprinting, because the button angles are a bit weird, you know, so like you can't, there is some limitations in terms of like, you have to like claw your hand around to be able to sprint and move the camera at the same time, because it's just too many buttons to press. But I realized I played a bit on the TV, and the free camera is amazing when you're playing with the motion controls. It feels so good. It feels, and I wouldn't have noticed it until you said it, and you pointed out like it's the first 3D Zelda game with 60 FPS as well, and that does feel revolutionary as well. It just feels so crisp and alive, and it does look so crisp and gorgeous in HD. Obviously, going from even Wind Waker, but going from Breath of the Wild, it does look a little bit like it's clearly an older game. It's clearly. I mean, there's little bits like where you would expect, like you go to one corner and there's just nothing there other than a texture. Where in Breath of the Wild you'd associate there'd be some pots and some things, and there'd be a lot more. Like you go into Hatiano Village, and every inch and every corner of that in Breath of the Wild is bustling with life, isn't it? And definitely. Straight away in Skyloft, there's corners with nothing there. So that's where it's showing his age a little bit. But I've not got off Skyloft yet because I've barely played it. But I opened it and played it, and I was like, oh, it's a Zelda game, and on the Switch, a 3D one, and we've only had one of them, and it feels really nice. And I can't wait, man. I can't wait to dive into it. What I will say, guys, is go. Yeah, you completed it, haven't you? I presume. And
yeah, and in terms of controls, I agree with you in terms of the holding the L button to rotate the camera didn't really. No, it didn't really bother me that much. It took me 2 minutes, like you said. To get the one I saw. I won't name and shame them, mainly because I literally can't remember where it was I read it, but I saw on other sites complaining that using doing that is a step backwards. Using the L button to move the camera on the right stick is a step backwards because it means you can't attack and move the camera at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you use the right stick to attack and then you hold the button down to use the right stick to the camera. But then I don't understand that argument because you never turn the camera and attack at the same time in any game. Because you could think about a game that's got a two-stick.
You quickly scan around, wouldn't you? Maybe you'd probably scan
it both at the same time. Because if imagine you're playing an Xbox game and the X button is used to attack, you physically can't press the X button and rotate the right stick at the same time because your thumb's on the X button. So there are no games where you turn the camera and attack. Yeah, so there's no games.
I've not played it. I've not played through it yet, so I don't got to the combat bit. But I'm going to presume Skyward Sword was built in a way that the enemies are going to be in front of you anyway, aren't they? Because it's built in a way to. Yeah. It's built that way, isn't it? Because you could never rotate the camera previously, so you're not going to be. It's not going to be like Ghost of Tsushima where you're swarmed by enemies all around you. I presume they're always going to be in front of you.
And it still keeps the button to auto focus on enemies. So even though. You can now rotate the camera freely. It's still, if you press ZR, you can still ZL. Sorry, it still snaps the camera to focus on enemies. So you can still do that. That's not an issue. You can still be homed perfectly on an enemy while swinging your sword. So it's fine. It's totally the controls are not an issue.
I think they've done a good job with this remaster. So obviously just a remaster, but they've done a good job in refreshing a game that, from what I can tell from the reviews, and even from my cursory glance at it so far, it feels like they've done a good job of bringing the game to the level where it should have been maybe all those years ago. And I think people who fancy, an old school is so far away from Breath of the Wild for what it's worth. It's like it couldn't be more polar opposite. It's like freedom, adventure, exploration. Then this is just a lot more linear. But if you're craving it, I reckon probably Zelda fans will probably enjoy it playing back again. So go check out a review, of course, on videogamechronicle.com, of course, the YouTube video as well. Final story of the day. Phil Spencer's been chatting to some other podcast. Small guys, kind of funny games. Never read them. He was on their Gamecast chatting away about a load of Xbox things. I listened to it yesterday. It's a really good. Phil's a great guy, by the way. Genuinely, what a lovely guy. I watched that, and I've never. This is my confession as a gamer. I've never owned an Xbox of any kind. I'm sorry. Don't hate me. I just always... I did have the money, man. I've always been a PlayStation and Nintendo person. Not that I haven't played Xbox elsewhere. Who hasn't? I've sat and played Halo at university. Of course, we all have. I'm going to get Series X as soon as I can get it in stock anywhere anyway. But watching the Gamescast yesterday on Kind of Funny with Phil Spencer waffling away, I was like, this is a guy who really, 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 really loves video games. And I know that's obvious. He's in the industry, but he clearly absolutely exudes a passion for video games. And he had quite a few interesting things to say as well. I'm going to start initially with this story that we reported from this podcast by Andy. And the Xbox head Phil Spencer has complimented PlayStation's DualSense controller and suggested that it might inspire Microsoft to add features to its own controller. Microsoft stuck to a familiar design for its Xbox Series X and S pads, only making minor changes to its design and under-the-hood improvements. In comparison, Sony opted to totally redesign its controller with new features such as haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. Speaking as part of the latest Kind of Funny Gamecast, Spencer said that the Xbox probably wouldn't release any major bespoke accessories such as VR headsets in the future, but suggested that an updated controller was far more likely to happen. He said, and quote, "When I think about our hardware roadmap, and I really love the evolution of Liz Hamren's team and the work that they've done, we're definitely thinking about different kinds of devices that can bring more games to more places. There's probably some work that we'll do on the controller. I think Sony's done a nice job with their controller, and we kind of look at that and think there are things that we should go and do. We're probably not but we're probably not in the more bespoke accessories place right now. We just look at what happens on Windows and other places and see if there's a unique opportunity for us. Right now, I don't think there's anything that's obvious to me. The controller stuff I think it's really interesting. I like the transparency for what it's worth. I like the humility as well, saying, you know, they've done a good job. And they have, for what it's worth, and this is not me just being a Sony pony, putting my Sony fanboy hat on. The DualSense is a fantastic controller. I love it. I think we've all used to it already, for what it's worth. But for people who haven't got a PS5 yet, if they plan to get one, it's really good. It's really, really, really good, and I absolutely loved it. And during Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, like the two click thing, the adaptive triggers for the different kind of like methods of firing weapons, I thought was just absolutely brilliant. I've not played Returnal, but apparently it's really good in that as well. It's a fantastic controller, and I do think that's it will Spencer's just kind of confirmed it. It's one area where they've looked at and gone, they've kind of beat us there, really. What did you make of these comments personally? I mean, what do you make of the controller situation, both consoles? Did these comments do anything for you?
Yeah, they're good. I mean, Spencer, like you said, Phil Spencer's like a fantastic boss. Like he's refreshingly honest and isn't afraid to say when they've messed things up. I think elsewhere in that interview, which is an excellent interview, if people haven't seen the kind of Funny Games cast, when we actually go and see it, because they're all a lovely. We're joking around, but they're a lovely bunch of guys, and they did a great interview with him. He, like, even elsewhere in that chat, he talks about an old developer that they bought over, and then the developer went under, and he just basically said we did a terrible job with them, and I wish we. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, it was Fuss or something like that. Terrible, because it's the team that do the Mech Warrior games, and I don't play them, so I can't remember who. But it was them, and he basically went on about how we made an arse of that, basically, and did a terrible job. And it's refreshing to hear someone not put spin on it and not say, oh well, it wasn't compatible with our vision and all that, and just basically say, look, we fucked that, and I wish we could kind of unfuck it, for want of a better phrase. So like he talks a good game.
Bill Spencer
talks a good game, and you can believe him, basically, because he's so you believe, even like you can see it kind of his influence kind of spreading through to other elements of the company. Like I'm sure I saw an official Xbox tweet like last week or so, praising my mind's gone, Deathloop, like for kind of being nearly done and stuff like that, and looking great. And it's like, that's crazy to see Xbox praising, although they own Bethesda, but to still be kind of drawing attention to a PS5.
Do you think this is like a genuine, like, conscious strategy, like, of them to be the nice guys, because they are hammering down on it, and for what it's worth, it works. I mean, like, everyone likes nice people, and it does feel like Xbox are really pushing the whole, it's for the gamers kind of fun, but they really feel like they're going for the everyone's favorite kind of uncle vibe. You know what I mean? Like, you feel like you get that impression, don't you?
There's definitely a strategy involved there. I'm not going to pretend that the guys they're just genuinely nice and that's it. I think they're trying to kill them with kindness, kind of thing. But
it's working, man.
It's definitely working, because they're coming across very well, and especially with Game Pass, they look like obviously they're still a corporation and they're Microsoft, for God's sake, but at the same time they're very much giving
little old Microsoft.
I know, Microsoft, up and comers. Keep an eye on them. They're an up and coming little group called Microsoft, but they're still giving the impression that they give a shit what about, like, the consumer, and, like, even if that may not necessarily be true deep down when it comes to looking at the bank balance and stuff like that, like, it's nice to at least feel like they give a shit. But in terms of the controller thing, if in the future, I'm not saying that he was suggesting this, but if in the future Microsoft were to bring out some sort of enhanced Xbox controller that has similar features to the DualSenses, especially with the triggers, it's going to lead to backlash and people saying, oh, they copied us, blah, 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 blah. Even though Sony's had no issues copying others before. You look at the PlayStation Move controllers for that. But Sony fans should be wanting this to happen. The PlayStation 5 owners should be wanting Microsoft to implement that, because if they don't, you're going to end up in a situation where almost every third-party game doesn't have support for those controllers once the honeymoon period's over, because every game has a budget and every game has resources that have to be allocated for certain things. And if you're making a game for the PlayStation and the Xbox, you're going to concentrate your resources on the things.
You're already making Far Cry 7 or whatever different on both consoles. You're gonna just it doesn't make sense, does it?
You're going to allocate your resources to all the elements of the game that work on both systems, so you're killing two birds with one stone. If PlayStation has exclusive features that aren't available on other systems, they're not going to get the most made of them, and you've seen this for generations in the past. The PS2 controller had pressure sensitive buttons, and nobody remembers that because nobody used it, because nobody bothered making use of the pressure sensitive buttons on the PS2 other than like Gran Turismo, where if you push it down harder,
genuinely forgot about that. I genuinely forgot about it. Yeah.
The original Xbox then had pressure sensitive buttons, but in terms of hitting them, not pushing them down but hitting them, there's like Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball had a mini game where the harder you press the button, the more they jumped, and that's the only thing I can remember that made use of it. Nobody touched it. The Vita had a rear touch panel. Nobody used it. The Wii U had that asynchronous multiplayer. Nobody used it. If you bring out a gimmick for your controller that other systems don't have, most developers aren't going to make the most of it because it's extra resources for a smaller element, a smaller percentage of the user base. So PlayStation fans can complain all they like, but secretly they should be hoping that Microsoft eventually incorporate those into their controllers, because it's just going to lead to those features appearing more regularly on multi-format PlayStation games, I believe. That's not to say it's going to happen, but I would like it to happen.
Yeah. And they are good. It is, I'm not trying to exaggerate, but it is really good feature. I absolutely love the DualSense controller. For me, it's been a big part of my PS5 experience as the next gen. I know it sounds weird; it's just a piece of plastic in your hands. But once again, the in Ratchet and Clank, I absolutely love the click when you go to the second function of your weapon. It's just so satisfying. And once again, the feel with obviously the adaptive feedback and all that, the haptic feedback. Sorry, this needs to be normalized because it's a wonderful piece of tech, and
it's definitely one of my favorite new like kind of next gen features, along with quick resume on Xbox. They're my two favorite kind of next gen features. The battery life's honking. I would like a new DualSense with a better battery.
See,
but other than that,
I've got the I'm not trying to once again be the shill here, but I've got the I never usually buy official accessories because I can never be bothered. But I bought the the charging dock. And the best thing about that is that it's plug based as opposed to you don't plug it into your PS5. So I've got it in the wall, basically in an extension lead with loads of plugs. Meaning as soon as the TV's on, the controllers are charging, even if the PS5's not on. So I would really recommend that. So I've not had a flat controller since I bought it at all because it's always charging. So I would recommend that, by the way, which I would never usually recommend something like that. But I've just got two controllers sat in the little white dock thing. They're never flat ever because once again, if the TV's on, even if I'm not playing the PS5, because you normally have to have your PS5 on or your console on to charge the controllers, don't you? But you don't in this instance. Exactly. So I would recommend it. It's just sat under my TV unit, and I don't get any battery problems. But you're right, the battery was going like that. I had 25 quid. I think it's been really worth it because I'm never charging controllers now anyway. But yeah, this is interesting, man. Like I totally agree, and I think it's important. And I'm happy to hear Phil Spencer say that actually as well, because it shows that there was basically really no real improvement. There was tiny improvements, but the controllers were essentially the same for the generations, apart from a few small quality of life things. And I do want to see how they react to that, and then I do want to see how Sony then react to their reaction. And so on, and it's always a good thing.
So Xbox's decision has its benefits as well. Like when I got my Series X, I wanted to try playing a game with my wife, and I just basically dug out an Xbox One controller and synced it up, and we both played multiplayer because they work. And although I haven't tried it, from what I understand, they work backwards as well. So you can use a Series X controller on a normal Xbox One, from what I understand, whereas you obviously couldn't use DualSense on a PS4. But so in that respect, it has its positives, but that's not to say that I wouldn't like to see a step forward, because especially when you consider, obviously, like we were saying earlier, Nintendo does its own thing, so they're off in their own planet doing their own stuff. But when Microsoft and Sony are competing so obviously head to head, you never really want to kind of give up ground in any kind of aspect, and it seems clear from what Spencer was saying that they're not interested in getting into the VR fight, so that's fine. That's one thing, but the controller is an essential part of gaming, and you can't really fall behind in that kind of battle. So I wouldn't be, the way he was talking about it, I wouldn't be surprised to see something, not necessarily next year or anything like that, but it sounds like in the future they're planning some sort of upgrade.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, some kind of like maybe not quite as far as a mid-generation upgrade, but like a third generation upgrade or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see something, especially when there's more Series X in the wild as well. Because at the moment, there's just simply not enough to probably warrant a new controller. Guys, that brings us to the end of this episode of VGC Off the Record. Of course, you can go and check out the full Gamescast with Phil Spencer. It's a really good listen. And of course, go watch our review of Skyward Sword HD by the man next to me here, Chris Scullion. It's really, really, really good as well. He gave it 5 out of 5. There's a spoiler. But watch it anyway, because you get like 10 minutes of ASMR from a lovely lilting Scottish voice as well. And anyone who slides off Chris's voice, I'm coming for you. It's
amazing how split that opinion is.
So was it? Is this guy a Viking? I want to.
Yeah, so I'm saying about a Viking. Well, no, and then but I mean,
what's the film? What's the dragon film? The animated one. I've forgotten what it's called. How to Train Your Dragon. It's because they're all Scottish in that. That's why. It's because they've all got Scottish accents.
See, it's funny because I've been doing like videos for a number of years now, and obviously not as high profile as on VGC, but you occasionally get people. You obviously get like Americans saying, "I can't understand him." It's like, well, deal with it. And then you get now since I've started doing VGC ones, you get half people saying you sound boring, and then half people saying I like this voice. And it's like, I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to start suddenly going, hey everybody, check out like a radio DJ. It's just
that's my job. Voice. Yeah,
I know that's it. I'm like, I'm not like it or lump it. That's what you're getting. But yeah, so come and watch the video review. Come and watch the video review and leave your praise / abuse about my voice.
Yeah, go for Zelda HD Skyward Sword. Stay for the lovely lilting Scottish accent. It's wonderful stuff. Guys, thank you so much for watching or listening to VGC Off the Record. Don't forget you can subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the big red subscribe button, or you can follow us on all the major podcast providers. For now, though, let us know what you think of today's stories down in the comments below. Go check out that video review and have a lovely, lovely weekend. Catch you next week.